What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, going through the latest Detroit Lions news, man. And we have a contract extension today to discuss, so let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, it is game day. It is Lions-Giants preseason opener, week 1 of the preseason, and we will be live here to react to it, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you stop in. It's kind of a trial for us in a sense because it is the first game, so we're trying some things out. Although it is the first game, we are going to be reacting. We're going to be having fun, so make sure you tune into that. And then right after the game, we're going to be live on Bleacher Report for probably about 30 minutes to discuss some post-game thoughts. I'll be live over there, so you can check me out there as well. And we may do a little bit of a preview/pregame show here today as well, so stay tuned for that. It may just mean going a little bit earlier on the live stream for this game, or it could be a whole separate show. So stay tuned for that possibility. But we will be live for the game, and we will have a post-game show. So hope to see you there. I could have just waited to kind of throw this into a potential pregame show, but man, I think this deserves its own video, and I want to give it its attention right now. But the Detroit Lions are extending the contract of Khalif Raymond for 2 more seasons. This was the final year of his contract with the Lions after getting that 2-year extension a couple of seasons ago, which was kind of backloaded, which we've seen with a lot of contracts. So for example, his cap number this year was just over $4 million versus the year before, which is just under $2 million. So it was backloaded a little bit, but Khalif Raymond now is getting another extension with the Lions. And now I don't know what he's going to be getting paid. I mean, I'm sure we'll get those details soon, and I would assume it would be a little bit of a raise from what he was getting paid before. He probably won't be getting paid as a top receiver in the league at 29 years old, but one thing we have seen is that the receiver market, in terms of just the value of that position, has risen big time over the last few years, and you're just looking at how much teams are paying for top receivers, but also reliable receivers. So there's that side of it, and the way I look at it is the only thing that could have happened with Khalif Raymond after this season is probably just adding more to his value. If you're going to let him become a free agent and then you're going to have to compete with other teams, I would just assume the only thing that's going to happen is his value is going to go up, because you don't have Jameson for the first 6 weeks, and he fills that kind of role in a different body type, but he's the most clear fit to fill that kind of role. And then right after that, I expect his role will just expand in a different way, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But let's start with the financial situation here for the Lions. We don't know what he's getting paid, so obviously we don't know all the details of this. Is there a void year? Is it backloaded again? But here's what we do know. You look at the Lions receiving core just under next season, who's under contract. There's a lot of I don't know under contract for next season. Okay, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown entering the final year of his rookie deal. After the season, he will negotiate. Expect him to get a pretty huge deal with the Lions, so that one we kind of know what we have there. But then outside of that, Antoine Green, a late-round pick this year. We'll see if he makes the roster. Jamison Williams, who's more of an expectation than anything that we've seen so far. We expect that he's going to be a big part of this offense. I think the Lions do as well. I expect him to as well, but we just haven't necessarily maybe seen all of that yet. Outside of that, it's the UDFAs. It's Dylan Drummond, who of course signed a 3-year deal because he's UDFA. Chase Cota. But usually those guys are a year-to-year kind of basis thing. Now, a guy like Jerry Jacobs was a little bit different because he played well early, and it was like, oh, okay, no, he's actually just going to stick around. And that's a heck of a deal if you can make that happen. But really, as you look at that, there's not a lot of like, oh, we know what we're going to get. You look at it, Marvin Jones Jr. set to become a free agent after the season. Josh Reynolds, free agent after the season. Khalif Raymond, until now, was set to become a free agent after the season. Denzel Mims signed a 1-year deal. Maurice Alexander, set to become a free agent after the season. Trey Quinn, set to become a free agent. Trinity Benson, set to become a free agent. Now, yes, we do have a couple tight ends under rookie deals. Sam Laporta, James Mitchell, so we feel good about that. But you can see that the receiver position definitely had some questions just next year. We're not even talking 2025. Now, one little cap note, as I think some guys are in line for some pretty big paydays, Lee McNeil, definitely St. Brown. But because St. Brown is still under contract next year, if they do just backload it at all, meaning his first year isn't monstrous, depending on how they set up this Khalif Raymond contract, there may not be a ton of overlap in terms of cap number there. And then on top of that, a guy like Jamison Williams, assuming that he clicks like you're expecting to, he's still going to be, it's expensive, yes, because he was a first-round pick, but not super expensive. His new contract wouldn't then kick in while Khalif Raymond's on this extension. Feel a lot better in terms of flexibility heading into this upcoming offseason after this season. Then you look at the Lions' financial situation and you ask yourself, will the Lions have money to do this? Well, in terms of effective cap space heading into next year, they're currently set at 7th most in the league, which means filling out the 53 roster with minimum contracts. If you did that, they'd have the 7th most cap space effective in the NFL next season. So yes, they have cap space. And yes, that includes Jared Goff under contract and not making any moves outside of that. Now, 2025, of course, they have tons of effective cap space, second in the league because Jared Goff is no longer under contract, and that'll be something that, that'll be a bridge that we cross when we get to it. So yes, the Lions financially have money, okay? And again, this just feels like a really smart move to kind of get ahead of this. And now I'm not even talking about, first off, the reliability of this receiver, what he's meant for us, special teams, the versatility, the ability to play pretty much every receiver position, and when we have one piece, we can just put him in a different role. And then, of course, the special teams impact. Did you know that this was an all-pro punt returner last year? I didn't even know that. I knew he was excellent. He was an all-pro, second-team all-pro punt returner this past season, so you got to give him some love for that as well. And now, I just wanted to share a couple specific numbers just to kind of give you an idea of what I think of Kalif Raymond. Okay, I think he was in my list for, breakout players or something like that we did with Bleacher Report. I put him in there just because I love me some Khalif Raymond. I think he's one of the best route runners in the league. Now, of course, me saying that isn't like, man, I've watched every single receiver run routes. But I can see on our team and I can see on other teams, and you could say, wow, that is one of the best to do it. And we did all the All-22 after every game last year for the most part, and you could see it. He just runs some of the best routes. Now, some of the deep, receiving production can be a little hit and miss because of the body type, because of the frame, and that's understandable. But he is an excellent route runner, and we saw it again here at joint practice, not just versus our own guys where he's cooking them. He does it against the other team as well, and you're just like, man, this guy, just no one can hang with him. He runs routes so well. There's advanced stats to look at. I'm going to hit you with a couple. First off, punt return impact, okay? So we know that this has been a big part of his presence. Last year, he had his first punt return of his career, and if you look at him statistically, he averaged 13.2 yards per punt return. To put that into context, that would be third best in the NFL, and the guy that was in second only had 4 punt return attempts versus his 20. So I'm essentially saying that he was second on that list in terms of average yards per punt return. Then you look at some of the receiving stats. Really, the last 2 years, consistency, okay? Last 2 years, pretty similar. He had 47 receptions on 64 targets, which were both slightly lower than the year before, but 616 yards, which is a career high for Khalif Raymond. Now, a slight little addition to this, he also was listed for 0 drops last season according to PFF. Although he was listed as well with 3 fumbles, which is not ideal. Don't forget, this was a UDFA out of Holy Cross that we brought in, gave an opportunity the first year here with Brad Holmes. Loved how he performed for us in terms of having that solid season. Then we extended him, and now again, that's why he's on the final year of his deal. So he's earned this for the Lions, yes, on special teams, but also offensively in terms of the consistency. PFF gave him a 72.1 overall grade, 72.7 in terms of receiving as well. But now, here's some of the statistics that I love, okay? Because we did this live stream. We did one of our podcast episodes with Rad. I talked about offensively, how I feel Gibbs, specifically Sam Laporta, the impact, specifically against man coverage, teams that play man heavy. Do we have enough man beaters? We went through all of that. I won't go down that path, but I will say this. One thing that you can look at, if you looked at by PFF, okay, Jared Goff's 5 worst games this past season. I throw New England into that because it was kind of a disaster offensively, and man coverage, they play a lot of it, and it was an issue for us. So I throw that game in. You throw those 6 games in, and you say, okay, who stepped up in those games, though? One guy that consistently played at a good level in a receiving room where we had a lot of inconsistency in those games, it was Khalif Raymond. To put it into perspective, Khalif Raymond averaged more receptions, targets, and yards per game in those 6 games than he did as a whole last season. Okay, so he stepped up in those big moments for us when everything wasn't maybe going the best. He was the guy that you could lean on. He actually upped his performance because he's such a darn good route runner. Here's another thing that I love. We talk about the deep threat impact. He, to me, clearly has the most closest skill set to a guy like Jameson in the sense of what they're going to want to use him for without having Jameson for that time. Very similar to the same thing that they said last year. Hey, without Jameson, we'll have Khalif do some of those things. He is the deep threat. He's the guy, take the top off. He's the guy that pull the safety and hopefully hit some of those, intermediate shots that Denzel Mims runs, that Marvin Jones Jr. runs, that Josh Reynolds runs. Now, I think Josh can kind of lean into some of the take the top off. All of those guys can, but Khalif Raymond is the most clear cut for that role because of just his electricity downfield and the threat that he can put. And last year we saw him connect on some of the biggest shots, whether that be Green Bay, Carolina, on some of those plays, meaning that 20 plus yard receptions, he had 6 last season on 11 target. But here's where I'm excited to see him, because once we get out of those games without having J-Mo, if let's say in a perfect world J-Mo steps in, he's exactly what you hope he is. He's the deep threat. He fills that role excellent. What happens to Khalif? Well, one thing that we see with Khalif is flexibility. For example, this past year, the first 2 games, he wasn't super involved, but you find a role for him. You just do. And And I think an area where he can really explode within this offense is if you have a guy like Jameson back. Because last season, Kalif Raymond had 24 receptions on just 30 targets, earning a 97, I believe, .9 PFF grade within 0 to 9 yards. The short attacking style. That's where I would love to see more Kalif Raymond. I think with a healthy JMO, kind of what we expect him to be, it can expand that part of his game, allow him to really eat underneath. We've seen him a little bit in spurts, like against Green Bay, some of the option routes that we can run, a lot of the work that he can do underneath because of the run after catch potential and also just the easy ability to separate and simply get open. So I think he brings that flexibility clearly. This just feels like a well-deserved, you look at the work ethic, post-practice, always the guy that's out there catching punts, doing work, bringing receivers along with him. He's out there every practice at the end doing work, whether by himself or with others. Kalif Raymond is that dude for the Lions. And I think this is well-deserved without even knowing what the contract is. I'm expecting it's nothing insane here, but this just feels really smart to get ahead of it and say, look, we lock this guy in. Because guess what? Hey, if we're good on the outside and we got those guys, we can allow him to work underneath and eat underneath. If we need that guy to take the top off, we can allow him to do that. Now, his frame limits him in a sense over the top, but he still has that electricity that you have to respect. And last year, we hit on a couple of those shots, which is just enough to allow the best of Denzel Mims and Marvin Jones. But I will throw one final note. Keep an eye on potential kick return. Now, we know that Justin Jackson retired, and I'm wishing him the best there in his off the field and whatever's going on with that situation. However, with Kalif Raymond, it is something to keep an eye on. Dylan Drummond was getting some kick return reps for the first time in the last joint practice. You also keep an eye, I think, on an Antoine Green's a very intriguing option, and maybe they go with a guy, if he was able to make the team, running back signing from Pittsburgh, whose name is just going right over my head right now, who's had a little bit of work in the past at a kick returner role. But Kalif Raymond has also been a kick returner in the past. He just hasn't done it much with us. He had 2 kick returns last year, over 32 yards on average, because one of them was 52 yards long. Outside of that, his average as a kick returner has not been great over his career. You're talking about 20.9, which is a pretty steep drop off from Justin Jackson, who I think was like in the 26 type of range, but he's had 55 kick return attempts. So maybe this is also something the Lions could be looking at, saying, hey, if we want to expand his role a little bit, now that no longer Justin Jackson is here. One thing about kick returner is, seems like it's not like the hardest thing to necessarily find, but I think one thing is critical is that usually that guy has to make the roster. Usually they're making the roster in some sense. So it's great to think that maybe one of these running backs could play that role, but then it seems like they're going to have to be able to also make the team. Kalif's going to be on the team. There's no question about that, and there won't be question about that. He's going to make the team because he can do all these different things for your offense, and he's tough as a blocker. Now, because of that, it could open the door for him to also potentially tap into that realm as well. But something to keep an eye on. Not saying he will, but I think it's something to keep an eye on. With that, though, again, we're going to be live tonight, Lions-Giants. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.